There's an old saying out there that if you control the food, you control the people, but if you control the money, you can control the world. And here comes the biggest problem with Canada and the United States, that urban housing alone could tank all of our national banks in Canada and the United States. It doesn't matter if you're Australia, Europe, urban housing is the biggest problem, and it very realistically could take down the banks. I want to show you guys some of the articles of today and why we are so concerned. This is our first article. Now, if you go into Yahoo Finance, you can see that Canada is among the most risk for a housing crash spiraling into a bigger crisis, say these economists. Now, let's take a look at this because there is a lot of good points that we have to cover. Now, it says a steep decline in housing markets, not just Canada, but in advanced economies around the world are starting to raise red flags among the economists. Now, Oxford Economics, in a recent report, it was warning of the global risk of housing market crashes spiraling back from these banking crises, and they are much higher than historic norms. One thing that I do like is, you notice I didn't highlight it, but it says that they use 35 macroeconomic and financial indicators. Here's the good thing that I like. I always like data. Most people use one piece of information, meaning my gut. I feel like it's going to go up, or I feel it's going to go down. So I love a good piece of data, you guys, but at least they're looking at a lot of different financial indicators and macroeconomic indicators. What I do like, if you read that, it says that they suggest up to 16% of the major economies have an 18 to 20% chance of suffering a housing crisis, compared to a historic average of 2%. Guys, 2% to 20% is 10 times the risk that we normally have. Canada, along with Iceland, Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark, are the 5 most vulnerable. And as we look at this risk chart here, you can see all these countries. Now, USA is way down here. Canada is coming up in second place. Now, this isn't a chart saying that we win, you guys. Canada is the second worst in the world. Nothing to brag about. So, you guys, Canada could be into some serious overheated territory, as you can see right here. So, let's continue on. The housing booms in advanced economies were fueled by a long period of ultra low interest rates. I need to pause and talk to you guys about this along the way. It is fueled by ultra low rates. I agree with this. Absolutely. Listen, we shut down for 2 years. There was no immigration coming to Canada. And everybody always says, well, it's because of a lot of immigrants are coming here. What is the other answer? If there was no immigration that's coming here, it's not because the Canadians are having babies. We have like one of the lowest birth rates in history. So it's not babies and it's not immigrants. So what is it? It's interest rates, you guys. Remember, I always joke, they're all on the same WhatsApp group. They're sending this out all the time saying everyone's going to lower their rates. So ultra low rates is what is fueling it. Nearly half of that increase in 2021 during the pandemic is when they rose. I think in around where we are, it's about 47% it went up. Historically, sharp falls in property prices is the precursor to housing and a wider banking crisis. Let me read that again. Historically, sharp falls in housing prices have been a precursor of housing and a broader financial crisis. So where we are right today in Toronto, Canada, and Toronto and Vancouver, the biggest 2 markets here. Toronto was the fastest growing city in North America for a decade. That one city could take down the entire banking sector. And this is going to show you how dangerous this could actually be. So if you look at this, I love it. You guys know that I always say the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Well, they're saying the higher they fly, the harder they fall. It is correct. The most expensive properties in the country are in Vancouver and Toronto, which means if they are the biggest and they fall the hardest, remember, Toronto and Vancouver now are almost at 30% drop right now in prices. Big trouble. Not just the crash is another article that we covered. We have another YouTube video on this one on the Bank of Canada risks falling too far behind the Fed. I think they got to keep raising rates because the Canada market is saying that we are no longer going to raise rates anymore. I can't see how they don't. Inflation is very, very hot. So if we break that down, this is what happens. Canada exports the majority of the stuff to the United States. So if the United States keeps raising their interest rates, what happens? Their dollar is stronger, means the Canadian dollar falls. So if it falls, it makes it very cheap for countries to buy stuff from Canada, our exporters. So we do export some things. So that will help some companies make a bit more money because they're paid in US dollars. But for the majority of us that buy products that are made overseas, when our dollar isn't worth anything, which is basically everything in Canada, we buy everything from other countries, the price is going to go up. So by the Bank of Canada not raising the rates and falling far behind the US, we could be in even bigger trouble because that's going to light a fuse on inflation. All right, let's continue on, you guys. Got a lot of great stuff for you today. So look at some more of the trouble that could come up. Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions. So we call this OSFI. They have their domestic stability buffer. These are the guys that kind of let the banks know what rules they have to play by. They're the ones like the police here. They want to tell the banks what rules they have to follow. So these guys are now saying that they have to have 3% as a buffer. What is this buffer? The domestic stability buffer is like a rainy day fund. It's a capital buffer that banks are required to set aside to be able to cover losses during financial uncertainties. Now, this is important, right? But remember, for every $1 million, and remember, an average price in Canada is $1 million for a home. For every $1 million, the bank only has to tuck away $10,000 for a rainy day. Remember those numbers, please. $1 million home needs 10,000. That's 1%. So they have upped it now because the OSFI is so worried about a crash. They've upped it now to 3%. So on a $1 million home, they have to now keep $30,000 in reserve tucked away in a bank somewhere. But tell me the problems that we're having when the average price of a home, of an average home in Canada, in Toronto, $1 million, has been losing $10,000 a week for a year. That's not just 1 month. I mean, averaged. The average home was $1.5 million a year ago, and now it's $1 million. It's lost $500,000 in 50 weeks, $10,000 a week. So them telling you about a buffer of 30,000 is only 3 weeks buffer. You guys, the risk on the banks is way, way, way greater than what has just happened on that 30%. Now, let's continue. OSFI is raising the stability buffer. This happened in December, but they are saying because the economic risk profile has changed considerably this year, they're worried about high household debt and elevated systemic vulnerabilities. We're seeing credit cards at record highs. And they're also saying future adjustments may be up to as high as 4%, where they're going to have to be at 4%. That's a lot higher. They're raising the amount of money banks need to set aside, as it gives the regulator more room to lower capital requirements when a downturn hits, to give the banks access to potentially extra needed funds. That is a key portion, you guys. Very, very key, is because the reason they're raising the interest rates now on mortgages is, yes, to cool inflation, but they need some bullets in their gun to be able to fight the next downturn. There is always another downturn, whether it's going to be a war or a shortage or an economic problem or something is always coming around. Every 5 to 7 years, something bad happens. We go into a recession, but they can't fight it. They only have interest rates to fight it with. If interest rates were at zero, they have nowhere to lower it to. What are they going to do? So they got to have some extra room so they could drop it. So they're raising up that domestic stability buffer. They're raising up rates so they have more juice to be able to give to the people to rescue the economy of the problem that they're creating right now. Now, how is real estate performing right now? Big, big trouble. Look at Toronto right now. Toronto median home prices sold 25% down in the past 12 months. If we look at the average price, they're usually pretty similar, 23% down. This is massive crash territory. This isn't just 5%. Previously, we would have been in a recession if we would have even dropped 5%. I cannot believe the world that we're in right now, when home prices are down this much, people cannot afford food, they can't afford their medication, they're making very, very tough life decisions. Home prices have cratered, people's life savings are gone, yet we still have the audacity to not even declare a recession. Terrible, 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 terrible. Either negligent or you're being malicious. One of the two. Either way, these people in power cannot be the ones that you can trust with your information. So that is the price. Now, guys, let's take a look at the type of property, because everyone always asks me this. In Toronto, detached properties are the most popular, 45,000 homes. Let's take a look at just detached properties, Average price down 28%. Notice it was at 1.6 million 12 months ago. Today, 1.2. If we want to say, okay, maybe it's not just detached properties, we want to take a look at just condos, for example. It's the second most popular type. Notice here, 21,000 units sold last year in the Greater Toronto area. Right now, that is down 15%. Still really, really, really down on prices. This is a giant, giant concern, because we're talking about markets where trillions of dollars are trading, trillions. And so the banks are not going to be able to absorb these losses. Now, we're seeing a lot of the banks are now extending their amortization, adding years onto it in a desperate attempt to keep them into their house for a bit longer. Now, we're also going to show you what the poison pill is where the banks are facing today. This is also the part that's going to make it very, very hard for people to be able to move past this and be able to actually make some money. Now, let's take a look at this. This this is what I want to show you. Let's just say last year that a property was $1,500,000, like we saw. That was the average. That was the average on the price before. Now, on a $1.5 million mortgage, most people have to put down 20% on their home, which would mean $300,000, which would mean your mortgage would be $1,200,000. Yeah. So this would be your mortgage. Okay. And this is the house. So you have a $1.2 million mortgage last year. That is last year. Now we know that prices, as we just saw on the charts, dropped a lot. Now the home is only worth $1 million. And now you are way, way underwater. So now on $1 million home, how much of a mortgage would a bank be willing to give you? I already told you it's 20% down, right? So they would be willing to give you an $800,000 mortgage. Do you see a problem here? Guys, between these two numbers here, the 1.2 and the 800,000, we are now short $400,000, which is an entire lifetime of savings. Now, this is a big, big problem. So here is where we're running into, and we got a bit more to go with this one, is number one, the majority of Canadians do not have a 30-year fixed mortgage like they do in the United States. The majority of Canadians are very, very high on variable rates that are changing all the time. But even those who are very astute, they're smart, they put it into fixed rate when they could. The majority of them can only lock it in for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years on fixed rates. Yes, there's some outliers, but the majority are always in that 5-year fixed rate. Remember that every single month you are having tens of thousands, 100,000 mortgages coming due. And as those people are running into the system and having to redo their mortgage, they're going to be running into this problem right here where you're going to be seeing them short $400,000. So let's see what this situation, how would this play out? In this situation right here, when they go to the bank, this is their situation before and after. When they go to the bank is going to tell them, okay, we're willing to give you $800,000 mortgage. He's going to say, guys, I need 1.2 million up here. And if I don't have that 1.2 million, I'm short. They're going to say, well, you need that $400,000 today or 10 days from now, or you default and we put your home into foreclosure. Ay, 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 ay. Can you imagine the number of people that are going to be in trouble with this when they come due? Big time trouble. But now comes the second portion of where we are. Let's just say today you have your mortgage with Bank of Montreal, okay? BMO. So if you have Bank of Montreal, maybe they're giving you an interest rate of 6%, okay? And you've been with them for many years and they're 6%, and they're willing to still give you a $1.2 million mortgage on your home, but they're trapping you into that rate. Now, let's say that you were another bank, competing bank, like let's say Scotiabank was offering 5% mortgage. And you're like, well, I want to go with Scotiabank. They're much cheaper. But Scotiabank says your home is only worth $1 million, you guys. So if your bank is only going to value it at 1 million, they're only going to give you 800 grand. They go, we'll give you 5% mortgage if you come up with that $400,000 that you're short, and then we're going to give you the 800 grand. Well, that's not possible. Who has $400,000 lying around, you guys? So BMO will say, well, we're going to keep this original. We're just going to pretend that the house is going to get back to its price. We're going to continue to give you the $1.2 million mortgage on a home that's only worth $1 million now, and we're going to charge you a higher rate. But maybe it's not just 6%. Maybe they want to make it 7%. Oh man, now you're in even more pain, right? If they're going to charge 7%, you're like, I want this rate, but you don't have that $400,000 to be able to clear what you're short. Make any sense, you guys? This is the danger that is coming for everybody. This is the mega, mega, mega problem. $400,000 short on one home. So what do you think would happen to the bank if he has to now go push this into foreclosures and all of those other problems? Oh man, we have to remember what happened in the United States during the great financial crisis. Only 4.5% of people that had to go into foreclosure caused all of the problems in the entire world. 4.5%. So you tell me, if we have millions of people who are now going to be, in this example, short 400,000. Remember, we were just using the average price, average. If the average has to come up with $400,000 each, you tell me, does 4.5% have that extra $400,000 lying around? Of course. And this is where we're running into right now. Though they have raised the buffer, it's not big enough. And this is not a problem that is solved overnight. This is a problem that every single year, it's something like 12% of the population have to redo their mortgage. Bang. So 4% is only every 3 or 4 months. So how are these people going to come up with that cash, as we're seeing in other parts of their life? Medication, insurances, taxes, food, energy, everything is going up. People don't have that extra money. And what we're seeing on a national exceptional levels from the US and Canada is savings is dropping like a rock and usage of credit cards is going way, way, way up. This is why I want to warn everybody that we have some serious trouble. I am the only economic realtor that is out there. I've been warning people for a year not to be buying properties. I really, really want people to avoid this and make their lives better. I want you to continue to have a roof over your head, food in your kids' mouths, and take care of your families. Anyway, you guys, I really don't have a lot of good things for the people who have over leveraged themselves. There's not much we can do. I get these calls every day that, David, I'm down $1 million now, and now I don't know what to do. So the time to do something obviously was yesterday, but the time always to stop the bleeding can be today. But for the people who have been very smart with their money, were able to avoid this massive loss, which was avoidable. If you were able to do all the smart moves, this is the great part for investors. We have not seen a buying opportunity for over a decade. And now we're going to be able to buy homes at extremely cheap prices coming up very soon. And I can't wait for it. I've been preparing for it for 10 years. And so remember that they always say luck favors the prepared. So you can never be more prepared than for what is coming right now. You guys, we have been dancing around this subject of a recession now for a year, but we've been overdue for one. Remember, historically, every 5 to 7 years, we have a recession. So I'm not surprised that one is here. I'm not surprised there's going to be many more that come in the future, but we have to be prepared for those times and also take advantage of it, because this is once in a lifetime opportunity to be able to make a lot of money and set your family up financially for a long, long time. Next 2 years is going to dictate the next 20 years of your life, you guys. I love you guys very, very much. I hope that you got some value from this. If you found it valuable at all, please consider subscribing, sending it to a friend. We would really, really appreciate it. Have a great day.